Welcome to the first episode of Unlikely Places, a new storytelling podcast that hopes to inspire folks with stories of finding strength, hope, inspiration, and peace in the most unlikely places. I'm your host, Devo, and I'll kick it off with a personal story, walking through some unlikely places that I was able to find peace, hope, and strength. So, to give a brief kind of bio of myself, I was born and raised in New York in a small town, or fairly small town, called East Patchogue in Long Island, New York. I was raised in a family of 4 kids. It was myself, my mother, my sister, my brothers, 2 brothers. And as a child, I always kind of had a different mentality. And what I mean by a different mentality is I always felt different. A lot of times kids my age didn't relate to kind of my personality. I was very flamboyant. I was a very outspoken child. Actually, only out of the home. When I was at home, I wasn't really very outspoken, often because I was the youngest. So I don't know, it was, I guess, kind of a reserve for the fact that everyone else had, more expertise, more knowledge. They were older. I felt like I was the young kid, didn't know anything, blah, blah, blah. But in, my social groups and my friend groups, I was often the person who was very outspoken, very flamboyant, kind of living life, seemingly unfazed by a lot of things that were going on. And as a young child, I came to understand that my sexuality was different from a lot of other friends of mine. And at the time, I had a lot of friends who were starting to get into relationships. They were starting to get boyfriends, girlfriends. But one thing that was a recurring thing that I noticed was a lot of my friends started dating the opposite sex. And I had a attraction to a mix, the opposite sex as well as the same sex, and navigating those emotions and feelings were always something that was challenging for a child to go through, or a young teen to go through, without a lot of kind of outlets or persons to talk to. At the time, I had great relationships with the school counselors and always kind of found refuge in speaking with those persons. But as you start to get older, you start to shy away from it a bit out of fear of judgment or maybe being looked at a particular way by your friend group or just other children in the school. And so I started to kind of develop my own path. I remember distinctly when I was had to be about 8th grade, maybe 7th or 8th grade. I just remember walking into the living room. I don't know what I was doing beforehand, but I remember walking into the living room and my mother was in the living room watching television. And the show that was on was RuPaul's Drag Race. And it was in its first season. I don't remember if it was exactly the first episode. Maybe it was a couple of episodes in. But it was such an impactful moment. That moment, I felt like I finally saw someone who seemed kind of like me. That had a flamboyant personality, that kind of had a more soft-spoken, high-pitched voice. My voice has since deepened, but as a child, kind of that higher-pitched voice that kind of blurred the lines of gender a bit, and just someone who represented themselves in a very extravagant, over-the-top way. All of the contestants had beautiful gowns, wonderful makeup. RuPaul would have amazing looks that would be presented in the show, and I don't know, I just felt so at peace and at home. And I think that that's the first time that I identified the feeling of community. And it's very, very weird because at the end of the day, it is a television show, right? Like, I'm watching a TV show and I feel this sense of community. I have no idea who these persons are. They're all much older than I at the time. I'm 10, 11, 12 years old, and most of them were in their 20s or 30s at the time. But I just felt such a sense of community, and it was probably the first time that I was like in such a dire desire to become 21, because I was like, if I could just go to like the clubs that these people are at, or if I could just be in the presence of these people, I know that I would feel at home. I know that I would feel comfortable. I know that I could have someone who potentially understands me the way that, say, my friends and family may not. And it's always been something from kind of that moment forward that I've held on to. So I do perform in drag occasionally. I am a drag artist, I guess, drag queen, however the identification falls. And that's always been a safe space for me. And I think that it connects back to that original moment where that was the connection for me. That was where I felt safe. Just watching that show is where I felt safe. And then when I'm able to put that on myself now as a persona, as a older person, it's so therapeutic. It's very relaxing for me to do that because it feels like I go back to that moment and I see myself in those persons as I am now, right? You often hear a lot of people say, I see myself in so-and-so, I see myself in this person, I see myself in that person, when they're kind of referencing who they saw themselves as a child. But for me, it almost goes a layer deeper. It's like I see myself as persons from that show, but I see the fully realized version that is me now. And it's always been such an impactful thing for me to be able to feel and see that. And honestly, that's been one of the really, really foundational building blocks of a lot of the strength that I have about my personality, about who I am, and about who I'm able to be as a person, as an individual, as a friend, as a lover, as, you know, a caregiver. So yeah, it's a little bit about my strength side. Now let's navigate and kind of piggyback off of that and talk a little bit more to the peace that I've developed from different kind of evolving stages in my life. So as I mentioned, for me, I found this comfort in drag, but really at a larger scale, the LGBT community. At the time, the show RuPaul's Drag Race was on Logo, which I discovered from watching the channel in secret. But from watching the channel, I discovered that that was a channel that was actually all LGBT. And I believe one of the first channels that was specifically LGBT content. So fell in love with other shows like Noah's Ark and, you know, a bunch of different shows that I just felt like helped further the clarity of my identity, and helped me see a bit more of myself in the future. So one of the things that I think has helped me to obtain peace along this story that is my life, is when I finally got the courage to move out of New York. So I moved out of New York when I was 21 years old. And the decision to move out of New York was a couple of things. It came from a desire to shed the history in the past of a lot of mental trauma, mental abuse, and physical abuse that I had experienced as a child and as a young adult, surrounding my gender identity, my gender expression, my sexuality, my personality. So it was part decision to, I wouldn't say run away, which that's how it's often perceived, but for me it was a rebirth, a chance to shed that, right? To leave and shed that behind as I crossed each state, because we drove. And as I crossed each state line, it was like I was shedding a bit more and shedding a bit more and shedding a bit more until I eventually felt almost metamorphosized, if that's a word. And that was part of the reason why I left New York. Another factor that kind of played into it was in New York, I didn't really see a large opportunity for growth. At the time that I left New York, I was about 2 years post dropping out of college. I went to college fresh out of high school. Didn't really have a plan or an idea. Wanted to be an accountant, I guess. I kind of liked math, and that was the only thing that I knew had a decent amount of math involved, or so I thought. So was something that I initially took interest in. But after not being able to financially afford going to college, as most other people in the country have also had to make the decision of, I did have to drop out of college, and something that definitely shook me, took me for a loop. It disturbed my peace very much so. Anyone who knows me from a child knows that two things that were very, very important to me growing up was family and school. School probably being the number one, to be honest. I have always had an obsession with learning. I've always had a desire to learn more, grow more, and just understand everything. Since a child, I've always had an affinity with tinkering with little things. So fixing the remote when it's broken, or trying to like resolve an issue with the computer or rebuild something. I always wanted to get down to the understanding of how things worked, so that if anything did go wrong and if something was kind of askew, I could go in and say, well, I know it works like this, or it should work like this, and this is how that comes to play. So let's take a look at those key fundamentals, right? So, so learning's always been a passion for me, and not being able to be in school really disturbed my peace. I felt lost. I felt like I didn't really have a purpose. It felt like everyone else that I knew was excelling above me, because a lot of my friends had continued their educations, being able to afford it. And here I was. And I think what made it hurt the most was I was working pretty close to full time. And I just still couldn't afford it. I just wasn't able to execute on paying the bills and trying to live and being at home. And it was a lot. There was a lot of factors that played into not being able to afford college. So, that also was another part of what made me kind of leave New York. Again, I didn't really see the opportunity for growth. I felt I don't have an education. I don't have a degree. I don't have, these backings by this large institution like a lot of my other friends have had. So maybe I just go somewhere and lay low and create a life that's peaceful but off the radar or small. And so that's what I did. I packed my car up. I drove down to Florida, and that was my life. Just up and left. I left everything behind. All of the friends that I had grown up with, a bunch of family, my mother, my sister, a bunch of family in New York. And I just moved. And it was a moment of finding peace. The first few years that I was here in Florida, I felt like almost reborn. It was amazing. My mental health was significantly improved. My ability to enjoy life was significantly higher than it was when I had lived in New York. And it just felt amazing to have this almost epiphany-like moment where I had got to Florida and I started working in a call center. And I had an apartment with two roommates, two of my best friends, which was my first time living on my own officially, as far as like paying bills and stuff. So it felt like, I'm doing it. Like it felt like I'm being an adult. I'm being the person that I wanted to be without a degree. I'm able to make a living. I'm able to, earn money and enjoy my life and go out and hang out and club and do all of these things. And I felt so peaceful and hopeful, because it was like, well, maybe New York was what was holding me back. Maybe it was a situation of, being in a kind of herd mentality, because the area that I grew up in, a lot of people that I grew up with still haven't left that area. A lot of people that I grew up with have never left the few towns over, right? Like a lot of people that I know and that I've grown up with haven't even left the state or been out of the country or anything like that. So it felt so liberating to be able to be a person who did do all of that with the seemingly lesser story of not having a degree and not having everything else. And I felt really good. I felt really damn good about being able to do that. So, moving to Florida gave me that peace, that stability, and the hope to try and kind of turn my future, my life, the vision that I had for myself and what I was able to do around. It unlocked a certain part of me that I didn't know that I had. It unlocked parts of me to aspire for more, to really gain the full vision of my worth and my purpose, and the fact that everyone, regardless of who you are, has purpose here. And it's twofold. It came from moving to Florida and having that scene change and being able to meet new people and talk with other people and get stories of people's lives and understand that inspiration and things happen and how people can turn it around. And it was very inspiring to meet these new group of persons. And the other part of it comes from the job that I worked. Working in the call center, I was very quickly being pushed up the ranks. And it was something that I was so resistant to at the time. Looking back, I was like, ugh, I do not want to do this. I don't want to be a manager. I don't want to go up this ladder. I don't want to do it. No. Because there was a extreme disdain for management from end users or lower, I don't even know what to call them, just like the normal staff. And so I was like, no, I don't want to be a management person. I don't want to be in that role and then everyone hates me all of a sudden. I don't want to be in that role and then I lose the friends that I had because I'm now a manager and they feel like they can't talk to me or trust me the way that they have. So I had such a struggle with the vision for myself because it didn't feel like the path that they were trying to put me down was the path that I needed to go down. But in hindsight, that actually was probably one of the bigger building blocks for the newfound hope that I've come to discover. Because it gave me the hope and the ability to see myself in a different light. It allowed me to unlock the fact that I have more than potential. I mean, at this job, not to sound cocky or arrogant, but I was not giving it my all at all. In fact, I was very much bullshitting a lot of that job. But I naturally did so well because of who I am at the core. It was a customer service position and I care about people. So it didn't matter whether I cared about the environment of the work that I was actually doing. I cared about people. And hearing people's stories of not being able to afford this medication or having issues with certain claims on insurance and stuff like that, it was something where I was like, I can't just, as much as I don't really care about this job, as much as I don't put in enough effort so that I can kind of fly under the radar, I can't just deny this person on the other side of the phone the care and the effort that they need to live truly. So I think that's what often made me kind of be up next, so to speak, on a lot of the management totem poles. But I decided never to really climb that. But it did resonate with me kind of retrospectively. It does resonate with me that that was a part of unlocking in my brain my potential. Understanding like, wow, these people really want you to climb this ladder. Like they really see value in you. They really see that you are worth something, that you have talent. And it was probably one of the first times that I've ever really seen that. I mean, I've had jobs in New York where I feel probably similar, but they were less significant in the grand scheme of things. So it didn't feel as impactful as, you know, these clients that I was dealing with at the time. These are a matter of life or death for some of them. This was, you know, their livelihood, the health insurance, things of that nature. So it felt more vital. So it was super important and super impactful to realize that someone saw me in that light, even if I didn't see myself in that light. So yeah, that set me up on that kind of path. And then the desire to grow kind of took off from there. I always saw that internally in the call center, as much as raising up the ranks probably would have done a lot for me financially, it wasn't going to give me what I wanted, because I really wanted to make an impact. I really wanted to have a lasting impression. Like, if I'm going to climb those ranks, if I'm going to be someone who's in a higher position, if I'm going to be someone who is above where I am now, it better be for damn good reason, and there better be measurable impact that I can say, this happened because of me. Like, I want to be able to walk out of there. If I were to take the manager position, I want to walk out of there saying, our agents are happier because of us improving this work process or something, you know? And that just was not going to happen at that call center. It just was not going to happen. They were way too unorganized. There was such a lack of vision management wise. It wasn't going to happen. And so I was like, okay, well, I know the company that I work for, and I do have a trust in their vision, and I do have a trust in, you know, their brand and what they stand for and what they do for a person. So maybe let me try and go around that loophole and work for them and leave the call center. Long story short, that didn't work out either. Definitely was a interesting thing to do, but it didn't work out that way, for a multitude of reasons. But looking back, kind of glad that it didn't too, because I don't really know if that was the proper step to get me where I am today. And clearly it wasn't, because I am where I am today without having that be a part of my story. So thankful for it, but yeah, wasn't my path. Cool. So now that I've rambled for close to 30 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever, I kind of would like to sum things up with this for at least like part one of my story, because there's so much more that could be talked about from childhood and from even adulthood and my now 4 years in Florida. So, or 4 years. Sorry, you can clearly see that I loved math once upon a time, but not anymore. So my 4 years in Florida definitely have taught me a lot, as well as like things from childhood, and there's been a lot that goes into my story. So this little blip of what I gave you all here is just kind of a sample of what to come. Kind of wrapping up here, and to tie it somewhat full circle. These are a few examples of the unlikely places that I was able to find peace, hope, and strength. The first one being watching RuPaul as a young child and finding a sense of community, developing a sense of comfortability in my personality and in who I am as a person. Another unlikely place that I found peace and hope was moving to Florida, making an entirely new group of friends, and working a job that I hated but was exceptionally good at. And again, an unlikely place. I mean, it's a call center, like, of all places to find peace and hope. That's definitely an unlikely place, if I do say so myself. So I just would love to leave you with this piece of encouragement. Take every step on your journey as the most important step. And whether that's a step forward, whether that's a step backwards, give it value, give it an intent, and just know that something will come of it. One of the other things that I would say is steps don't always have to go forward to accelerate your process. So there have been many steps backward in my life, many steps that have been, or I'll say with air quotes, backwards, because I don't truly view them that way, but There have been many steps where it doesn't seem like it's an advancing step or something that pushes me along on my path, but in hindsight and in retrospect, it has. So sometimes it takes a retrospective look to see the value in those steps, but every single step is important. Forward, backward, in between, it does not matter. It's important. Large, small, it's important. So look for those inspiration in those unlikely places. I encourage you to document your story, whether that's a mental note, an actual journal that you log, or even voice memos on your phone. Just document your story. Anything that you feel empowered by or impacted by, document it. I encourage it so that you can go back and reference those moments and look back and all that good jazz. And lastly, for some like logistics, shout out to me because, no, I'm kidding. Shout out to, honestly, there's so many people that I could name that have unintentionally inspired this. But a few persons that, and they don't even know that I'm about to say this, but a few persons that have truly inspired me to do this. Rachel Park, a dear mentor and friend of mine who has an awesome small business. Rachel Park Ties, I believe. Fact checking, just making sure that I quote people's businesses right, y'all. Yeah, Rachel Park Ties. SurvivorModa.com is Rachel's website as well to kind of see a little bit more about Rachel and how inspirational they are. Or she is, sorry. And then a couple more shout outs. So Jessica Murphy has been a mentor of mine for 5 ever. I told her, I was like, you're going to be my mentor. Thank you. And have a nice day. She's also an amazing person. So, and these are people that I hope to also have at some point as guests on the show. So I'll lightly shout them out. But also another person is Rachel Watson, who's another mentor of mine as well, and love Rachel to death. The double Rachels that I have in my life. I'm so grateful. And then the last person that I'd like to shout out, which more directly inspired the podcast itself, is Ray. An amazing fucking person. Excuse the explicative. And yeah, if you want to know more about Ray or see anything about their story, you can go to strayedroots.com, and they also have a podcast called Strayed Roots, I believe. But yeah, thank you, the people I just mentioned, for being an inspiration, being a person that continues to inspire me to not only share my story, because all 4 of those persons have impactful stories and very important things that they can share about, shaping moments in their life. So thank the 4 of you for being inspirations for me to getting emotional to share my story. And I hope to have the 4 of you as guests at some point during this journey. Thank you, everyone who's listening to this. If there's anyone listening to this, I truly appreciate you, and thank you for joining me on the first step of this journey and this process that will be. I hope to, as I kind of briefly alluded to, I hope to have guests on this podcast going forward. So definitely continue to look out for those. I'm also going to hopefully have like a video version of this podcast. I don't know if that will be 100% valid for the guests, because obviously, everyone has their right to say no to being on video, but I hope to have some video version of the podcast, because I know that I like to video listen to my podcast. So hopefully that will come as well. And then, yeah, just kind of keep an eye out you can look on my social media for kind of updates. So my Twitter is Devon M. That's DEVOHNE_M. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Same thing. Devon Moore is my name on there. Yeah, I hope to have your ears one more time. That's a super creepy thing, so I'll just say I hope to have you come back and listen to me ramble some more another time. I truly, truly appreciate anyone listening to this. If you feel like dropping me a note of inspiration, feel free to tweet me, feel free to message me on LinkedIn to let me know that this is worth something. And yes, I hope that you have peace. I hope that you have hope. And I hope that you have strength as you carry through your next chapter of life, your next few days, your next moment of whatever you're going through. Know that you're worth it, know that you're valued, and know that you always, always have purpose. Thank you for listening, and see you soon. Unlikely places, unlikely places, unlikely places, unlikely places.